Hi everyone, and welcome to Market Audience and Social Research, SPSS Workshop number 5. I'm Kelly Koff, and in today's workshop I'll show you how to use SPSS to test hypotheses. For this exercise we need to open up our Hobbit data file. If you're not sure how to do this, just go back and work through the SPSS tutorial exercise number 1. Otherwise, just click on SPSS to open that database. Then I'm just going to click on my Hobbit data and open that one. Then my database opens. So first off, what I want you to do is have a look in the variable view just to get to know your variables. So we'll just open up that data label so we can have a look at this. In this tutorial, we'll be looking at number 3 here, which is likely. How likely would it be for you to patronize this restaurant, the new upscale restaurant? Then in question 12, we'll be looking at some of the options here, which is preferring formal wait staff wearing tuxedos, preferring unusual desserts, preferring a large variety of entrees, preferring unusual entrees. We're going to skip that one and go to elegant decor. Then we're going to look at prefer jazz combo. So these are the ones that we'll be using in today's exercise. So if you have a look at your printout, you can see that the objective of today's tutorial is to test Jeff's hypothesis that customers who stated that they're very likely to eat at the Hobbit's Choice restaurant will either very strongly or somewhat prefer each of the following. So they're the ones that we looked at, which is the wait staff with tuxedos on, this one here on line 14, unusual desserts, line 15, the large variety of entrees, which was line 16, unusual entrees, which was line 17, elegant decor, which was line 19, and jazz combo music, which was line 21. So for this exercise, first what we have to do is establish the null hypothesis. So if you remember from first year statistics, the null hypothesis, as the name suggests, is usually the hypothesis that states that there's no significant difference or no relationship existing between two variables. So for this exercise, our null hypothesis is going to be that there's no significant difference in the likelihood of the preferences for these variables. But then this question actually gives us two alternative hypotheses. So the first alternative is that the patrons that are very likely to eat at the restaurant very strongly prefer those options. And the second alternative hypothesis that we're going to test today is that those people that are very likely to eat at the restaurant somewhat prefer those variables. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do to test Jeff's hypotheses is we're first going to apply a filter so that we're only looking at the responses of those people who selected that they are very likely to eat at the Hobbit's Choice restaurant. So to do this, what we need to do is to click on our data and then go down to cases. So just second from the bottom here, select cases and click on that. This opens up our select cases dialog box, and we just need to click this one over here which says if condition is satisfied. So if we click that radial, that'll give us this option here. We'll click on that to open the select cases if box. So what we need to do here is to first select the variable that we're going to look at, which was the third one down on the list. So that was how likely it would be for a customer to eat at that restaurant or to patronize that restaurant. So I'm just going to highlight that variable and click this button to bring it across here. So that brings across likely. Then what we want to do is add the equal sign. So I can either type equals or click this button here. And then we know the code for very likely with 5. So I can type in 5 or I can click the 5 there. So this is going to just extract the cases for this variable that answered 5. So now we're going to hit continue. And so now once that's done, we just hit OK. Then we get our receipt from SPSS. Now when we go back and have a look at our data, nothing's changed there, but when we hit on our data view tab, what we can see is all of the cases that didn't satisfy those conditions have now been struck out. So here we have very likely in our third column this data is going to be analysed, this will be analysed, and this will be analysed, but anything that didn't get that response will be left out of the next stage of the analysis. So this is exactly what we need to test Jeff's hypotheses. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just run a very simple one sample t-test. So you might remember this from your first year statistics class. If not, a t-test it's a parametric test which you can use to make inferences or statements, making statements about the means or averages of a parent population. So we use this test in statistics if the standard deviation of the population isn't known, and we have a relatively small sample size, so like less than 30 data points. So understanding what's going on with the averages or the mean differences is a really easy way of seeing if we can accept or reject the null hypothesis. And what we need for this is the p-value. So what we're looking for is for the t-test significance to be under 0.05. So if this happens, we know that there is a significant difference between the means and that we can reject the null hypothesis. So in market research, we see this a lot for providing credibility to products. So like 9 out of 10 dentists prefer Colgate, or 8 out of 10 cats prefer Whiskers, that kind of thing. So this is a statistical test that we can do to provide some validity to those claims, and it establishes whether or not the null hypothesis can be accepted or rejected. So what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to click on Analyze, just up the top on the ribbon here, and then go down to Compare Means. So find that one there, then go across to one sample t-test. So just here, and then click on that. Then what we need to do is to select the variables that we were looking at. So it was the third one here. Then we go down to wait staff, desserts, variety, unusual, elegant, and jazz. So these were the variables that were included in Jeff's hypotheses. So these are the ones that we want to bring across. Don't worry about the others right now. Okay, now what I want you to do is have a look down the bottom of the box here that says test value. So the first time we run this test, we want the test value to be 4. Now the reason that it's 4 is because we know that that's the code that was allocated to people who responded somewhat prefer to that question in the survey. So that preference was coded as 4, so that's the test value that we're going to test this time. The next time we run that test, we'll put a 5 in this box. But for now, just pop a 4 in and click OK. Now we can have a look at that data, or we can run our second t-test to test if Jeff's second alternative hypothesis is true. So let's run that second test before we interpret these. So to do that, we're just going to go straight back to Analyze, Compare Means, across to the one sample t-test, click on that one. Now you see SPSS remembers what we've done, so we've already got everything here. All we need to do this time is change that 4 to a 5. So just type 5 in that bottom box, hit OK, and here we go. Fantastic. So now we've got our test value of 5 in this one here. And then if we just scroll back up, we have our test value of 4 just here. The first thing that you might notice is our one sample statistics, this first box, is actually exactly the same for both of our tests. So the reason this occurs is because the one sample statistics are calculated on the variables themselves, and these variables haven't changed even though we've changed the test value. These are our descriptive statistics. So they're the same, because they're the same for both tests, we don't actually need both, so I'm going to delete the one in between just so that we can get more data on the screen at once. So I'm just going to do that just by clicking on this one sample statistic box, right-clicking on my mouse, and just cutting that out. I might do that for this as well, just to save some space. Okay, so now when we scroll, we've got our one sample statistic at the top, our test value of 4 here, and our test value of 5 here. So this is what we really want to look at. So this is our one sample test. So this box contains our inferential statistics. So this is where we can determine whether or not the mean of our sample is significantly different from the test values or not. So the first box here, T, shows our observed T value. So that's it for test value 4, and down here for test value 5. The second box shows our degrees of freedom. So our degrees of freedom is just n minus 1, which here our n is 72. So 72 minus 1 gives us 71. So that's our degrees of freedom there. So the third box across is our significance of the two-tailed test. So this one here, this is the one that's really interesting. So this is the one that tells us whether or not we can accept or reject the null hypothesis. And what we're looking for here is a p-value of less than 0.05. So all of our significance here are 0.000. So yes, they are less than 0.05. So you just have to note that this significant two-tailed test, this corresponds with the t-test and the degrees of freedom. So that's how we get that result there. So SPSS does all the hard work for you, and then you can just interpret the results. So what we can tell from this is that we can reject the null hypothesis, because there's no significant difference in the likelihood of the preferences for those variables, which were the wait staff with tuxedos, unusual desserts, large varieties of entrees, unusual entrees, elegant decor, or jazz combo music. Now, when we look at the fourth box, we can see that the difference between the observed samples mean and the expected mean of our test values, which for this case was 4, and for this case down here was 5. So when we look at the test values, we see that all the mean differences of these values of the test in table 5 are negative numbers. So all of these are negative. And then with the exception of the preferred jazz combo in the one test sample for test value 4, all of these are positive numbers. So that one's a negative and these are all positive. So what does that mean? So really what it means with the test value 4, we have some positive numbers here. So they're slightly positive, so 0.5, 0.58, 0.514, 0.542 and 0.681. So for these variables, there is some weak evidence to suggest that Jeff was right. The negative variables though, these ones here, so the preferred jazz combo of 4 and all of test 5, these are all negative. So there's no evidence really to suggest that Jeff is right or Jeff's null hypothesis is right in that one. So the last two boxes here is the 95% confidence interval. And this is usually the one that we use, 95% or 99%. Rarely we'd go down to 90, but 95% is the most commonly used. What this is saying is that if we were to repeat this test again and again and again 100 times, 95 of those times we would expect the results to be between the lower level here and the upper level here. So for this one, the lower level is 0.42, the upper level is 0.66. So the mean difference there is between those, and we would expect that to happen 95% of the time. So that's the confidence that we can have in these results. So for Jeff, this means that there is some evidence to support his second hypothesis, and that those people that are very likely to eat at the restaurant really do somewhat prefer the unusual desserts, large variety of entrees, unusual entrees, elegant decor, and formal wait staff wearing tuxedos, but not the jazz combo. And then with the test value of 5, there's really no evidence to support Jeff's claims there. Okay, so if you want some more information on interpreting the results, look at Chapter 6 in the SPSS Analysis Without Anguish textbook. And don't forget to save your file and upload it to the LMS. Okay, until next week, take care.